Hi there, and welcome to part 2 of Living Life Generously, a special podcast mini-series from First Baptist Church. I'm your host, Anna Stolkup. We're so glad you're listening as we explore what biblical generosity really looks like. Last week, we learned how generosity is an identifier for the people of God, and today we're exploring what it looks like to pass that value on to the next generation. I'm joined today by our senior pastor, Ross Chandler, along
Anna.
with our resident Next Gen experts, our student pastor, Josh Garza,
What's up?
and our children's pastor, Nicole Sims.
Happy to be here.
Welcome, everybody. I wanted to run this phrase by you, next generosity. How do you feel about it?
Next gen, next generosity.
Yep.
It fits.
Yep. No, nobody likes it, but that's okay. I wanted to start...
Nicole liked it, apparently. So.
Nicole likes all of the puns. She likes them all. She's my favorite joke buddy. So it's a good thing we office right next to each other, and
Yep.
it's the best.
And it's unfortunate for others. I'm just kidding.
Rude. So rude. Well, starting off, since we are talking about generosity in the next generation, I wanted to offer a moment to ask about how you learned generosity, or maybe you didn't learn generosity, how your growing up and the things you learned, as you grew up. Was it your parents that taught you? Or was it somebody at church that taught you? Just something impactful. We can start with you, Ross, if you have.
Oh, thank you, Anna.
Yeah.
I mentioned it, I believe, in the last podcast, that my parents gave in such a way that I saw them doing it, and we passed the plate, and I witnessed my parents putting a check or cash into the plate, and there were many times where my father would write out a check, or my mother would, and they would hand it to me, and I would put that in the plate, and so I knew that my mom and dad were giving. And then when I got my first job as a young guy and get a little bit of money, my parents, particularly my mom, would say, "Well, you need to tithe part of that." And so she really did start to teach me about what it meant and to give. And so I learned it from my mom and dad first.
Awesome. Nicole, did you have a story?
Man, I've got so many stories, but I'll keep it to one.
Yeah, you can have one story.
Being similar in age to Ross, a little older, grew up in church, and so my parents modeled giving. We had our little tithe envelopes that we would put quarters or pennies in, and with great zeal, we would take them to church on Sunday and either give them to our Sunday school teacher or put them in the offering plate. But real quickly, a particular story, when my twin brother and I started our own lawn mowing business, and we earned good hard cash, we would take that to my parents, and we would sit down and figure out what our tithe was. And I would like to say that maybe I was more happy than my twin brother giving it. No, if Nick ever were to listen to this, Nick, sorry, we were both happy to give a tithe.
Anna, one more quick thing.
Yeah.
When I was growing up, we would do the Lottie Moon Christmas offering, and we would do the Annie Armstrong offering that supported the North American Mission Board, what was called the Home Mission Board back then, and then Mary Hill Davis, which supported the Baptist General Convention of Texas. So in my children's ministry, in the RAs and other GAs for the girls.
Yeah.
We played a role in all of that. They would challenge us to go and bring, kind of like we do in Vacation Bible School. You know how we challenge all of the kids to bring, and we give money in VBS. We do it every single year to some great cause. In the same way, I grew up with those things. We did a VBS challenge, and then we did an RA and a GA challenge to give to these things. And I did, because of the stories behind the missionaries and the stories behind the great need that we were giving to, it always felt like my heart was touched by all of that. So I did take it seriously going home. Mom and Dad, we we need this, and this is what I need.
Did you get to pie anybody in the face?
I don't remember that being a part of it. So we have taken it to the
great
next level
incentive, yes.
here. For those of Anna's referring y'all to our vacation Bible school on the last day. That if the girls bring more offering than the boys, then the girls have someone to put a pie in a boy's face, and vice
Absolutely.
versa.
Mm-hmm.
And they do love that.
They definitely do. We're already saving our. I've had a request from my daughter. We need to go to the bank, and I need to get my money in coins right now. So,
Nice.
how about you, Josh?
Yeah, growing up, I didn't necessarily have a model of generosity of giving per se, a tithe, and a lot of what I learned now and my theology behind it is as I went through school and as I had little glimpses of what generosity looks like in the church. For us, for our family, as I grew older, I learned we were pretty severe in debt, and
Yeah.
we had a lot of stuff where. A lot of close fists when it came to money. Whenever the plate would be passed at church, it always felt like there was a moment where my parents would take a moment to look at me and say man, they're touching their pockets, grabbing the person, we just don't have anything. But I don't know why they were telling me because it's I can't do anything about it necessarily. And so I didn't have a framework to notice that or see that. But there are glimpses where I did get to see what generosity looked like, even in a different context that led to what I believe the Lord tells us about this. I got my first paycheck in high school. I remember I cashed in. I was super excited. We get to a Stripes gas station, and my mom asks for an icy. I was like, oh. So I reached out my hand. I was like, well, are you going to give me your card? And she's like, you just got paid. I was like, oh, I'm not paying for the icy for you for this. And it turned into this kind of blown up argument kind of thing. But it was a moment where I was like, yeah, why was I so hesitant to do this? So I learned something about myself that day. And then as I studied what Jesus talks about with money, what Scripture tells us, learning that I had a really close fist when it comes to generosity.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Hey, that's some good knowledge of self. I think I can identify with that a little bit myself, that I tend to be a little tight-fisted, and it's a big question that I have to ask myself all the time, well, when would it come naturally for me to start giving if I'm not already giving what I have? Well, thank you all for sharing those things. I'm a millennial, in case our listeners don't know me, and my generation is big into kind of deconstructing, which can sound like a really scary term. It doesn't have to be scary, but it's just that process of taking things apart, figuring out how they work, why they work, what is tradition that's part of my faith, what do I carry forward with me. And I think ideally this is sort of that working out our salvation in fear and trembling idea that Paul wrote about to the Philippians. Ross, I wanted to ask you, we have talked a little bit about tithe, and so something that I was thinking about is what would you say to a person who questioned whether tithing is something that's just from an antiquated belief system or tradition, and maybe is that necessary that we keep doing that we keep carrying that forward when, we know it from the New Testament that we should be generous, but it maybe doesn't say as much about tithe. Is it really important to teach it to our kids?
Right.
Or is it just an Old Testament thing?
Thanks, Anna. So for the listeners, my entire sermon last week was about how tithing is a New Testament concept and not just an Old Testament concept. And we actually see in Matthew 23:23 a New Testament passage where Jesus Christ himself told the Pharisees that they need to keep tithing. He used the word tithing. Jesus said it. And the Pharisees were tithing, which was good, but they were neglecting other matters of the faith. And Jesus said, you should keep tithing and do these other things. And if tithing were only an Old Testament concept that Jesus did not care about, then he wouldn't have said that. We also know that it existed before the law. So when people say, well, this is only of the law, it existed all the way back. In early moments in Scripture, we see that people were giving a percentage of 10%, sometimes even higher. And really, the law, for anyone who says that, people were giving more than the tithe. As I also preached, there were 3 types of tithes. They would give to the temple, 10% to the temple and the priests. That's a tithe. They would give another one to the religious festivals, and then every 3rd year they would give a tithe to the poor and needy. And so really they were giving 20% to 30%, depending on what the year is. And so a friend of mine said, man, would we give any less to the grace of the gospel of Jesus Christ, who died and rose again and gives us everything? Why would we give less to that, which is so amazing, than people in the Old Testament gave to the law? I mean, if the law was asking them to give 10, my goodness, we have something so much better than the law, so much better than the thing that the Old Testament even talks about in its fulfillment in Jesus Christ. Of all people who should be the most generous, we have been given the most generous of all things, of all human beings who have ever lived. We've been given so much, and for us to not be generous, or to try to, say in a squirrely kind of way, well, the word tithe isn't mentioned enough in the New Testament to satisfy me. It's like, well, I think unless you have PTSD from it and you were abused, which I think is valid, and that's happened to people, I think those people might have a lot to get over, and some, and I have a lot of sympathy for that. But if somebody legitimately has not been abused and they have a problem with it, and they are a Christ-following person, they really need to think about why. What is it in their own heart? Have they made money their master? As we talked about last week, when I think your question was, why would people not want to do it? And I think they have to, really search their soul for what generosity means. So it's absolutely it carried into the New Testament, and the vast majority of Christian churches since then have put an emphasis on this.
Nicole, just kind of piggybacking on that, because so we're talking about, continuing this on, and I guess I think of you almost as our like early spiritual childhood development expert in our church, that you're dealing with the youngest of the Christians. How early do you think is too early to start talking about these types of things, or is that even something that exists? Like, how do I, as a parent, go about teaching my tiny person in my house, PJ, about generosity and tithing and giving?
That is a great question. I think for all those parents that are listening, caring adults in the lives of young people, I would say that we want to teach children something that may start as a behavior learned, but perhaps not the heart formation yet. So we want to teach them what it means to behave in a way of being a giver, being somebody that can give sacrificially and cheerfully. But when I mention those 2 words, the sacrificial part, the cheerful part, that really begins to speak into the heart formation. So I want to say there's no magic age to start. There is something beautiful about the ages of 5 and up, where kids are beginning to understand something beyond themselves developmentally. They're not so self-centered or self-focused. But I wouldn't wait even until 5. I would start early with the practice, the behavior of teaching 2 and 3-year-olds what it means to give a quarter or a penny or a dime or something to Jesus, and use that word where this is the money we're giving to Jesus. So I don't feel like maybe under the age of 2 might be too young, but certainly from 2 on, I would begin to encourage that behavior, and then pray for and teach the heart behind it as they get older and older. And that will be an ongoing thing that we teach them as well as we continue to teach ourselves, I'm sure.
I saw a concept that I really liked when I was trying to prepare for our conversation today, which was this sort of concept as 10%. I mean, just being really a starting point and kind of like training wheels. There's nothing that says we need to stop at 10%, and there's nothing that says it needs to be, there are many ways to be generous, but sometimes people, especially, either the box checking, rule following types or people who just don't know where to start. It's like, well, a really great place to start is 10%. And I can remember being in, I think, 4th or 5th grade, and my teacher showing us how to do, like, this is the easiest percentage that you're ever going to learn how to do in school is 10%. Just, jump that decimal right on over, and now you know how. And that being just such an easy, impactful place. And I think it's kind of, feels kind of merciful that math is so easy for us. But
Yes.
I just liked that sort of training wheel and getting ready for bigger and better things in the world of generosity.
Absolutely. Great metaphor.
Josh, I wanted to bring things over your direction here. You're dealing with a generation who, you're dealing with the fallout basically of what my generation is creating with all of our deconstruction, like deconstructing until you barely can recognize things in the world. There's a bunch of stuff like social media and comparison and just a whole host of issues that previous generations did not even know were going to be a problem, which I'm so sorry, I guess, like, welcome to student ministry. It's just like always going to be a thing.
On behalf of everybody, I accept your apology.
Okay, thank you. So what do you think this generation of teenagers right now is facing when it comes to living generously?
Yeah, I think what they face is just the scarcity mindset of things. And I was reading articles that were talking about you need to make this much money in order to live a happy life, and it was an absurd number. Part of me was wondering, like, how did you arrive there? And I don't believe that's true, but people were sharing it around like it's truth, like it's gospel, and I just don't think that's right. At least what I try to convey to students is biblically in talking about, like, man, when God made creation, there's plenty for everybody. Like, there's enough for everybody to indulge and enjoy and celebrate together. What has happened through after Genesis 3 is the scarcity mindset. What if there's not enough? And so it's what they face is picture it like a party, a really nice party, and there's plenty of food, there's drinks, and everybody's having a great time. And there's a host, someone else paid for this stuff. Like, all the stuff that you're indulging in is someone else's dime. But you, as a party participant, start to hoard and think, like, what if there's not enough at this party? So you end up, like, taking some treats that, like, I really love these and I want to have enough for myself. And then you have these, like, power structures that develop from it, and realizing that, like, dude, at some point you forget that you're in somebody else's house enjoying their things. And so learning to loosen the fist of that and to just say, man, God has been so generous to me. Why would I not be generous with what he has given me? Get to give back to the church and to be a part of restoring creation the way he intended it to. It's so much more. I believe it's so much more for your heart that when you don't give, when you don't do these things, man, that's your choice and that's your prerogative. But the crippling thing that'll happen in your heart is that you're resistant to the work that God is doing in your heart. You'll do things that don't make sense because you're so scared and operating out of fear, rather than recognizing, man, God loves me and he loves this person too. What do I need to do? And all of a sudden, everything feels priceless in a way that it can be given away in those moments, I think. So, yeah.
That was good. I love that picture of the party and the host, and it's on their dime. And the opposite of scarcity is abundance. And is that not what Jesus teaches us? That he wants to give us the abundant life, so we in turn live in that abundant mindset.
Yeah.
That was good.
Yeah. Well, I want to, let's keep things here with you, Josh. We're going to move into sort of a practical and applicational moment. Do you have any principle or a rhythm or something that you could suggest to listeners that they could carry into their life to start modeling generosity in their homes?
Yeah, for students and things that I try to encourage them, because some of them it might have been like me, like, what do you mean I have to give this money to my mom for her to have an IC? And then to think of like, I give this to the church, like, well, that's when I make more money, like when I have, like, I'm able to pay for my apartment and stuff like that. And it's just not true. And if we start off that way, I think we're starting off on the wrong foot. And at least I recognize that I'm stepping into a place where like they've never had to think about this for some of these. So I try to expand their mind of like, well, the most important thing, man, start with a budget. Even if you're making a little bit to enjoy for the summer, make a budget of what you give to the Lord first, your first fruits. And then after that, what is it what are your needs? Fun money, money that you can give, like, hey, I'm going to pay for my friend's meal. Like, be intentional about all those things. And man, if you, as they, become young adults and they're navigating through stuff and they see how expensive stuff is, that they look at their stuff, and man, it is the commandment to give 10%. Let's say you crunch all the numbers and to live, like, man, you're at 8%, you're at 7%, whatever. And I encourage them, let your prayer be, God, I pray that next year when I get this raise, I pray that I can give 8%. I pray that I can give 9% the next. Help me, God, to be the person that is able to give the bare minimum of what you call us to do.
Yeah.
And at least model, at least a practice of, this is a journey that you're growing to trust the Lord. He's not trying to rob you of anything. And so it's a practice that I think is it's a spiritual muscle that they have to work out. And then once it's fully grown, that they can exercise it like the rest of us.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
How about you, Nicole?
Oh, I'm just loving this. And Josh, I love your examples. I know raising our boys to be givers, we would put money on their lunch account at their school. And they were so giving that they would just give away all that money to all their friends. And Troy and I were like, well, hey, that's great. Maybe slow your roll just a bit. But I think I would love to see families come together, whatever that family dynamic is, that caring adult that has that young person in their life, and to do to begin to teach them this idea, this behavior again, and then pray for the heart formation to come along with it as they teach and talk through it, to have like project giving. And what I mean by that is like Vacation Bible School is a great beginning moment for a mom or a dad or a grandparent to say, hey, we're going to save money to put in that girl bucket or that boy bucket and raise money for these missional moments that our church is trying to do with social assistance and with the food pantry. I also think we could have like jars. If your family could come up with a jar or a box, maybe decorate it and say, this is going to be our Jesus money box, and we're gonna just fill it up, and then each month we're gonna take it to the church, and we're gonna put it in the offering, and just load down that offering plate, or find ways like projects and moments. Kids, yes, repetition is important, and week in and week out giving will be awesome. But I think, what if you could just build some momentum that by the end of each month, you're giving a jar full of coins that you've worked so hard. And that tangible, concrete, seeing that level of money go up is going to be powerful and meaningful to those kids and to the adults in their life that care about teaching them.
I love that. So
Yeah.
visual. So yeah,
Yep.
absolutely.
Yeah. How about you, Ross? Any practical step you could think of?
I think that what's already been shared is sufficient.
Yeah.
We've talked about all of the major, very practical principles. The idea of first fruits is not a theory; it is practical.
Yeah.
And I think that the Bible talks a whole lot about this, and making it practical, doing it, and talking about it is going to have huge spiritual payoffs for yourself, your family, and certainly the Church of Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Well, as we get ready to wrap up, Josh, I wanted to ask you, we had been talking about a concept that I thought was interesting, which was giving as like generosity as a way
Yeah.
of choosing peace.
Yeah.
Could you share about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think peace is Jesus is the Prince of Peace.
Yeah.
So part of choosing Jesus, you are choosing peace at the same time. And so even what I was talking about earlier of like whether it's budgeting for students, for the teenager that's hearing this, a parent that's hearing this to encourage their teenager, that when you budget, like you're choosing to have that peace of mind. And man, you're at a place where like you're able to give a tithe and you also have something to be generous with. You're intentional with that. You're choosing peace. And so I think of like the times where like in my family when they were like reaching in their pockets like, oh, we don't have anything. I didn't want to feel that pressure. I also didn't want it to be insincere. And so like taking time where you just say, hey, this portion of money is also has nothing to do with our tithe, but also is something that we just want to be intentional about blessing people. So when the time does operate, it's not like we have to come up with this magical number. We just get to be someone that just gets to bless because the Lord has blessed us. We know that there is enough for everybody, and we want to model that and live that out. And so part of that is choosing to have peace, the peace of not panicking of like, where's this going to come from or how this is going to be, but actually live in the generosity that Jesus calls us to.
I think that's cool. And I think it marries a little bit. There's kind of that planned portion of it that you're deciding that something is important and that you're going to put something aside, but then also that element of spontaneity sometimes. Sometimes you don't know, like you have set something aside to be generous with, but you don't know what it's going to go toward yet.
Yeah.
And I love being able to give when somebody asks something that I didn't know, but I can say, yeah, actually, I do have something that I can give to you.
Yeah.
And I think that's a cool way of doing both of those things at the same time.
Anna, real quick with it, the reason I like peace, there's an entire program that is entitled Financial Peace University for a reason. It's because money causes conflict.
It really does.
When we get this wrong, husbands and wives fight about this, and we fight about it with our loved ones, and we fight about it in ourselves. When we get this issue wrong in an unbiblical way, the turmoil that it causes is just huge. People have gotten divorced over this issue before, and people lie about it, and they go into massive debt. How can you have peace if you have run up a credit card debt so high that you can barely live? You're constantly worried about everything. God doesn't want that for people.
Right.
And so he, as I've said over and over again, he is for us in this and not against us. And so, Josh, I love it. Talking about the peace that we can have when we get this right is a blessing.
Amen.
Well, this was such a rich conversation. I appreciate each of you coming here and talking with us. And if this sparked something in you, our listeners, we would love for you to keep it going. Talk with your family, talk with your small group, and definitely be talking with your kids and with your students about what generosity can look like in your home. Thank you for joining us on this special series on generosity. And if you missed the first part of our series, please be sure to visit our YouTube channel to listen. If you're interested in giving to the mission of First Baptist Church, please visit www.discoverfirst.com/give to get started. Thanks for listening. And once again, I'm Anna Stallcup, encouraging you to live life generously.